in week 2 in the National Football League, 11 out of 16 games were one possession games. Not only that, there were only 3 teams in the entire NFL: the Cardinals, the Saints, the Buffalo Bills. Those 3 teams are the only 3 teams in the entire league that scored over 30 points. That's it. That's where
Yeah.
we're at in the NFL. So we're at a point where I am debating, and again, the Browns should blow the New York Giants out, but you're like, is 6.5 too many points?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
we are at that point in the NFL where the Giants lost a game by the Commanders because Austin Seibert kicked 7 field goals. What the hell is happening?
yeah. And same thing in week 1. Remember, the Steelers beat the Falcons when the Falcons scored the only touchdown of the game.
The Steelers have 1 touchdown all year. They're 2-0.
Exactly. It makes
I can't even comprehend. We are having a revolution. Remember a couple of years ago, and I've been on this, the last couple of years was all about offensive coaches. They were winning. They were getting the conference championships. I think defensive coaches finally have had enough. I mean, we are at the point where defensive coaches and not turning the football over and not even having the better quarterback, you're winning games again.
Yeah. All right, so let's get to top 5 games. And do you want me to start or you?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go from number 5 to number 1. There are a lot of intriguing games this week. I can make a case for almost any game besides maybe Panthers, Raiders, and Browns, Giants. Um, but I think there are a lot of intriguing games, and I could see you making an argument for a lot of these games. I'm going to start with number 5. Sunday Night Football. Kansas City, Atlanta. Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins. For me, a lot of pressures on Atlanta here because, again, before the season, I thought they could start 0-3 and win the division. I don't think that anymore. Tampa's better than I thought. Saints are better than I thought. Atlanta still needs to get their offense moving. Can they hold Mahomes down enough to steal a win at home before they go into their divisional play? They got the Saints, Bucks, and Panthers, and somewhat of that order the next 3 weeks after that. And if they keep losing, does the pressure mount in Atlanta to make a change at quarterback? So that's a very interesting game to me. At number 4, my game in the 1 o'clock window, Philly at New Orleans. We already talked about the Philly collapse. Saints are 2-0. What kind of Saints team are we going to get? Can Philly rebound? Because here's the thing with the Eagles. Their next 2 games, the Eagles have a very weird schedule this year, where after the Atlanta game, they will only have 2 home games between last night and November. They play the Browns at home week 6. They play Jacksonville at home week 9. That's it for home games. They got to go to New Orleans. They got to go to Tampa Bay. They got to go to the Giants, and they got to go to Cincinnati. So a lot of road games in there. I think Philly's got to split these next 2 with New Orleans and Tampa. Things could get ugly quickly. Number 3 to me, a very sneaky game in the 1 o'clock window. The 2-0 Houston Texans, led by C.J. Stroud, who really played a good game, I would say, against Chicago on Sunday night. Not a great game. They take on the 2-0 Minnesota Vikings, who I don't know if they're going to have Justin Jefferson. I don't know if they're going to have Jordan Addison, but I do know this. So far, I've been right on the fact that I said Sam Darnold is going to have a Baker Mayfield type year. He looks awesome in Minnesota. Number 2, the Detroit Lions against the team that we both said could shock the NFL this year, the Arizona Cardinals. What they did to the Rams, I can't even imagine. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. goes off. How do the Lions cover him in the secondary? Big game for Detroit all of a sudden. You don't want to go down to 1-2, especially, Chicago and Indy's a go either way game. If Minnesota can pull off a win against Houston, and then you got Green Bay, who will probably win the game because Will Levis will give it away. So there's pressure to me on Detroit here to win. And then number 1, I just talked about it. Dallas got embarrassed last week by the New Orleans Saints. Baltimore is 0-2. They cannot fall 0-3 in this division. There is pressure on both teams, which means I think you will get the best effort out of both teams. Kevin Burkhardt, Tom Brady on the call, once again doing a Cowboy game for the third straight week. That is your number one game of the week.
So before I get to my list, I so badly wanted to put the San Francisco 49ers against the Los Angeles Rams on this list because when both teams are healthy, it's usually a fantastic matchup. But Debo's probably not going to play. The Rams are going to be without Puka and Cooper Kupp, and they're down a bunch of offensive linemen. So it pains me, but I can't put 49ers Rams on the list. All right, so number 5. It's a battle of 2-0 teams in the Steel City. I'm surprised you didn't have this game on your list. The LA Chargers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers, they've won their first 2 games on the road. You talked about it. They've only scored 1 touchdown, and yet they're 2-0. I think that's a bit of Steelers black magic in there. And then you look at the Chargers, they've beaten the Raiders and they've beaten the Panthers. Let's see how the Chargers do when they go on the road to a very tough, formerly known as Heinz Field, now Acrisure Stadium. It's usually pretty difficult to go into Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers. So I've got that game at number 5. Number 4 on my list, I like the game you chose, just a little bit lower. I'm going Texans Vikings, and that's mostly because of the uncertainty of whether Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison are going to play. I think that takes a little of the excitement off of this game for me. Granted, it's Stephon Diggs going against one of his former teams, so you got that story, and of course the other story of both teams being 2-0. But if the Vikings were fully healthy, it would be much higher on my list. At number 3, I've also got the Ravens and Cowboys. Like you said, Baltimore, they're 0-2. They should be the ones that are embarrassed based on how they lost to the Raiders last week. And then on the other side, you've got the Cowboys. Got just trashed up and down the field by the New Orleans Saints. How do they respond? So I think that's a big game. Coming in at number 2, I'm headed out to the desert. Detroit Lions, Arizona Cardinals. We both said the Arizona Cardinals are going to be a very pesky team this season. I don't think they're quite ready to make the playoffs, but they are not a team you want to play late in the season. And you and I were both very high on the Lions. If I remember correctly, both of us actually had Detroit as the 1 seed in
Both of us had them in the Super Bowl.
Yes. And you touched on it. Like Green Bay, they look like they could be okay with Malik Willis as their starting quarterback. We'll see how Minnesota does without Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, if that's the case. And I'm iffy about Chicago so far.
I mean, Steve Waldron looks like the worst offensive coordinator I've ever seen. They can't protect the blitz. I mean, who would have thought Caleb Williams is running for his life? I mean,
yeah, but so I got that game at number 2, I believe. And at number 1, your game is the one I have at number 1.
Wow.
The Philadelphia Eagles heading down to the Bayou to take on the New Orleans Saints. Because now the Saints have put everybody on notice. You got a very good defense coming in with Philadelphia. We know about that defensive line. And I want to know with Jalen Hurts, can he stop making these decisions where he, like I was saying to you earlier, where he leaves the pocket too early? Because when they're healthy, you've got A.J. Brown, you've got Devontae Smith, you've got Dallas Goedert, you've got Saquon Barkley. I think his problem sometimes is he thinks a little too much.
I agree with that.
And he doesn't always trust his weapons. Now, I know the Eagles are going to be without A.J. Brown, but still, I think Philly has an offense when they're clicking that can possibly keep up with New Orleans. Now, again, New Orleans, I don't think they're going to be catching anybody off guard anymore, given how their offense has started. So, how do they adjust to kind of this new pressure with everybody talking about them?
So you have Chargers Steelers, I have Chiefs Falcons. That's our only real difference. So outside of order, I think we're pretty close this week. The one thing I will say is I debated putting Jacksonville and Buffalo on there. That's a Monday night game, just because the Jags need to win this game. If the Jaguars drop to 0-3, their season's probably over.
The other game I really debated putting on here was Bears at Colts.
Me too. I
Because
debated that a lot too because the Colts are 0-2, and you have Matt Eberflus going back to Indianapolis, former defensive coordinator there, obviously the head coach in Chicago. And Indy does not blitz a lot. Gus Bradley is not a blitzer. I'm wondering if he brings the house more this week against Chicago because they're running the same offense Philly ran last year. Let's just call four verticals every time against the blitz to get killed.
yeah,
I was losing my mind. I felt so bad for Caleb. I was literally sitting in my basement crying. I'm watching. I said, is this the Philadelphia Eagles of last year I'm watching? It was a complete disaster offensively. When he had time, he actually looked good.
yeah. The other game I thought about putting on this list, Packers at Titans, because really if it wasn't for Will Levis,
2-0, and I thought about that too, but then I'm like, it's Will Levis. And Brian Callahan literally told him, what the bleep are you doing? I almost said it.
yes, the Titans should really be at least 1-1, if not
They really
2
should be 2-0. They had the Jets beat.
yeah. And, and of course you have the story of Malik Willis going against the team he was traded from.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of good games this week. Let's just say that.
It still disappoints me though that 49ers Rams is not going to live up to the hype because again, like I remember that NFC Championship game just a couple years ago.
By the way, everybody's saying San Francisco is going to stomp the Rams because they have nobody on offense, and I'm just not so sure about that.
I heard an interesting idea during ESPN's NFL Live, and I want to run it by you. If this season just completely falls apart for the LA Rams, theoretically, what if they decided to trade Matthew Stafford to the Las Vegas Raiders?
Well, my one thing is I don't know how much time Stafford has left. And the Raiders' offensive line is not nearly as good as the Rams' offensive line. They would have the weapons. I actually don't make that trade if I'm Vegas.
You stick with Gardner Minshew?
No, I'd probably draft the quarterback.
But why? I get it, but at the same time, like, if your defense is going to play this well, why not try to at least make a push for the playoff spot by going and getting somebody like Matthew Stafford?
Oh, wait, you're saying this year?
Yeah.
You're saying at the deadline.
Or even before. Yeah, I'm just talking about this season.
I don't know if the Rams would do that mid-season. Would they?
If things are completely falling apart for the LA Rams, I think they would consider it, yeah.
The hard part is you're in a division with Mahomes and Herbert, and how many years left do I get out of Stafford?
Right. Yeah, but again, I'm just talking about this season.
Yeah, I don't know about that, honestly.